Second oral question, Lord Snape.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question standing in my name on the order paper.
My Lords, the Department has no plans to reduce payments to train operating companies by 10% and has not assessed the impact such a reduction would have on train services. As noble Lords would expect, we have asked operators to provide credible, efficient and sustainable business plans which will deliver reliable and resilient train services that adapt to passengers' evolving needs and drive value for taxpayers.
My Lords, would the Minister accept that a 3.8% increase in rail fares, the highest in almost a decade, together with any reduction in subsidies, and I would still like to know exactly how much the Government is prepared to put forward towards our rail industry in the next financial year, but those twin attacks would lead to reduced passengers travelling by train, more congestion and pollution on our roads, and surely are not the way forward so far as the Government's carbon reduction targets are concerned.
Well, the Government is very focused on making sure that the services that we provide for passengers meet the needs of passengers. Now, it is the case that ridership at the current time is around just under two-thirds of what it was pre-pandemic. It may be that there has been substantial and enduring change. So what we are doing is working with the train operating companies, asking them to look very carefully at timetables, asking them to remove duplications where possible, look for savings and efficiencies, because at the end of the day, we need to provide services that meet passengers' needs, they need to be punctual and they need to be reliable.
If the government isn't cutting the subsidies for the train operating companies, can the noble lady, the Minister, tell me why services on the West Coast Main Line have deteriorated so badly over the last year or so? Trains are often cancelled, frequently overcrowded and often late as well. I never thought I'd be saying bring back Branson, but services under Avanti appear to be markedly worse than they were previously. What is the Government going to do to improve the situation?
Well, that's what I'm saying about what we're doing in the broader scope of things. So Great British Railways will be developing the whole industry strategic plan. The call for evidence for that has now closed. And then we are also asking each particular train operating company to produce annual business plans which will streamline the passenger offer to make sure that the demand is actually met and in balance with the supply, remove duplication, as I have said, and ensure operations are as efficient as possible.
It's clear that government demand in savings, running into many millions of pounds, will result in cuts in Network Rail's maintenance costs. We've already seen what a casual approach to Network Rail and the use of outside contractors can lead to in the light of earlier accidents at Ladbroke Grove and Potters Bar. And the recent report into the train crash at Stonehaven in 2020 found that a drainage system wrongly built by Carillion, who subsequently went bust, and left unchecked by Network Rail, led to the crash. The Rail Accident Investigation Bureau said that the tragedy was, quote, a reminder how potentially dangerous Britain's volatile weather can be, close quote. How did the Government come to the conclusion that this is now an appropriate time to make major cuts in maintenance roles on our railways? And will the Government now reconsider the decision in the interests of safety, which should be the paramount consideration rather than financial considerations?
Safety is, of course, the priority for everybody who works in the railways, and of course that tragedy at Stonehaven is deeply regrettable. The Government has no intention of diminishing the work that we do in terms of safety and maintenance. It is, of course, extremely important, but what we must do is look for efficiencies within the system, because it is the case that we have seen this significant reduction in demand. We must make sure that we protect the investment of the taxpayers, and that's what we're doing.
So, as the noble Lords have mentioned, the 3.8% increase in rail fares simply adds to the financial pressure on families at this difficult time. Does the noble lady, the Minister, accept that now that the Government's ended the franchise system, the revenue from fares going straight to the Treasury, it is entirely in the Government's hands what policy it chooses to use in the future to attract passengers back onto the railways? And does the noble lady accept that for environmental reasons it is essential that lower fares are used in order to attract passengers?
Of course, we'd like to keep fares as low as possible, but we also need to make sure that we support the crucial investment and also to pave the way for financial sustainability for the system as a whole. When we took the decision on the regulated fares, we did need to look at inflation. We chose to peg it to July RPI, which resulted in an increase of 3.8. Of course, it could have been much higher had we used an RPI from a later month. We also delayed the introduction of the increase by 2 months, which was particularly beneficial for those buying annual season tickets. And there are other ways that we can encourage people back to the trains, and we're doing as much as we can working with the train operators. For example, the Book with Confidence intervention was extended to the 31st of March, which allows customers to rebook their tickets if they're unable to travel without administration fees.
Lady Minister, draw our attention to any statistical evidence for the notion, which is counterintuitive, that there isn't a vicious circle developing here between cutting services and raising fares.
I don't accept that at all. What is right is that we have to make sure that our services meet the needs of passengers and that they are punctual and that they are reliable and that the contribution from the national taxpayer is appropriate. Now, it is the case that there will be areas where there is duplication, areas where there can be efficiencies found. The William Shapps plan for rail states that in 5 years' time savings of about £1.5 billion should be available after simplification and efficiencies. Those are the things that we're trying to drive out of the system. We want passenger services to be as good as we possibly can make them, because we really would like people to travel on our railways.
My Lords, does my noble friend have a view on the level of unionisation on the railways and what the consequences of it are for the cost of staff and pay?
Well, my noble friend makes a very important point, because I think all noble lords will have seen that there is a level of unrest amongst those unions that represent those working on the railways. Sometimes I feel that their behaviour might potentially be counterproductive for the long term. For example, we have strikes at the moment on London Underground, where it will be the case that because of the pay deal that they reached a couple of years ago, they will be getting a pay increase of 8%.
Can the noble lady, the Minister, explain how raising fares and cutting subsidies to the train operating companies contribute towards one of the key aims of levelling up, which is to improve public transport? And I especially ask her to think about Yorkshire in this context.
Always thinking about Yorkshire, my lords. Always. But the noble lady does raise an important point, but there is an amount of money that will be going into the system, and it will be used to service, at the moment, a lower number of passengers. And that's where we've got to get the balance absolutely right, and we've got to work with industry to support them on the initiatives to boost demand, but also ensuring that the services are there when they need them. And in terms of the increase at 3.8%, if compared to what inflation currently is now, actually that is not a significant increase, given that we could have had a more significant increase had we used an RPI from a later month.
My Lord, could I press the noble Baroness a little bit more on my noble friend Lord Ross's question about Network Rail's costs, because I understand from many in the industry that Network Rail have been told to cut their costs by 40% in the coming year. That seemed an enormous amount compared with what they've been doing at the moment and the need for safety. Could she confirm whether that's true or whether it's completely wrong?
I don't have that figure with me, but I will certainly write to the noble lord with further details around Network Rail's expectations for the coming years.
Doesn't the reduction in passengers, which she says may well be structural, doesn't that endanger further the investment case for HS2?
I don't think that is the case. I mean, obviously, there are various scenarios that we consider when we look at HS2. HS2 is a very long-term strategic system. It does connect many of our major cities across the country. And provided we get local transport integrated with that investment with HS2, I believe it will be successful.
An article in the paper this morning about closing many ticket offices. Can I ask the Noble Lady Minister, is this likely to happen? If it is that a better service for the passengers on our rail network?
Well, I think ticketing and fares reform is a key part of what we hope to do with Great British Railways, and the leadership there will help the massive complicated fares that currently exist. We will be supplementing that with £360 million of investment into fares, ticketing and retailing. We will deliver contactless pay-as-you-go in 700 stations in urban areas across the country, including 400 stations in the north. And we will be providing digital ticketing across the network, and we will upgrade ticket vending machines. We will obviously have to look at the number of ticket offices that are available, but we will also make sure that people get the level of customer support that they need.